Welcome to the Great Loop Radio podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today, our topic is selling your boat. And sadly, most of us will eventually sell that boat. So we are going to bring you some information on how to get the boat ready for that and what to do to actually sell it. Our guest will be Michael Martin with Great Loop Yacht Sales, and we will bring him in just a moment. Before we do that, as always, I want to take a moment to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners and viewers to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And with the business out of the way, I'd like to welcome back to the Great Loop Radio podcast, Michael Martin. Michael is one of the owners of Great Loop Yacht Sales, which is an Admiral sponsor. Michael is also a Platinum Looper who is on his third time around. So Michael, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, coming to you from the flybridge of the Perch.
Yep, always fun to see somebody else who's on a boat. So let's kind of jump right into this topic. All of us, even if it's not immediately after the loop, most people will eventually sell their boat. There's this impression out there, and I hear it all the time, that loopers are kind of all one and done, and they buy a boat to do the loop, they do the loop, and then they sell it. And, is that really that common, or is that kind of a myth? What's your thoughts on that?
It used to be that way. It was a bucket list item where people would just come and do the loop in a year cycle, which is kind of the design of it, I guess, and move on to the next adventure, whether that's RVing or backpacking Europe or whatever. But I would say it's definitely changed in the last 5-10 years. We're seeing people hold on to their boats a little bit longer. I would say actually past, COVID and beyond is where we've really seen a big shift. People holding on to their boats longer. The average looper holds on to his boat anywhere from 3 to 5 years, typically. And a lot of people want to get their boat prior to doing the loop, get used to it, make it what they want for the loop. And then go on the loop, and then afterwards, do side trips or do the Bahamas or do the Chesapeake, do another loop. So we are definitely seeing people staying in the boating community a lot longer than just the 1 year and done.
And I think there certainly are some loopers who do the one and done and sell the boat and move on to something else. A lot of the people I talk to who do sell their boat, and it is fairly common, but to sell it right after the loop is because not that they're leaving boating, but they're going to be doing different kinds of boating. And I know you're a proponent of the boat needs to fit the mission. So oftentimes after the loop, people might be getting the right boat for the next thing. So do you see that often? Do you see people upsizing or even downsizing after the loop, but staying in boating?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably an even split whether they upsize or downsize or get out. There are definitely people who leave the boating community and do other things, but we are definitely seeing, people who are going all in, either before they do the loop or once they've done the loop and realize what this lifestyle is like, they go all in and sell everything and buy a bigger boat. Still something that can, with height and depth, do the loop route for the most part, go deep Caribbean, spend time doing, Long Island Sound or the Down East Loop or other adventures. And we do see people downsizing to smaller trailerable boats. The Great Loop is a great area to explore, but the western half of the United States is just as nice. So you can take a trailerable boat and head out to the West Coast and do the inner passage up to Alaska, or, the Seattle Sound, San Francisco Sound, down around San Diego. There's a lot of cruising that can be done on smaller trailerable boats. And when I say trailerable boats, what comes to people's mind are really small boats, but you could also do something like a mid-30s, like Mainship Pilot, that could be put on a semi and taken out there to the West Coast or taken to wherever you want. You don't have to trailer it yourself. So there's a lot of variations in what I mean by downsizing in smaller boats.
Yeah. Okay. So understanding that a lot of loopers are staying in boating, but still selling that boat, there are some steps that you will need to take in order to sell your boat. So let's kind of start at the beginning. What are the first things you need to do to get your boat ready for sale?
Just like with the home, curb appeal is huge. If somebody's walking up to your boat on the dock, they want to be able to look at the boat and say that boat's been taken care of. So they want to make sure that the exterior of the boat is cleaned, waxed, detailed. And I typically at this point, this is a lot of us do our own cleaning and waxing and all that kind of stuff, but this is a point in time of your ownership of the boat where I really believe that it's important to hire somebody to do the detailing. A lot of times when we're doing the detailing of our boat, we're not thinking about, that person looking and opening hatches. So if you open up the anchor windlass hatch or anchor locker hatch and the gutter inside is all green and black and bugs and gross, that's something that we don't typically clean on a daily basis, but detailers will get in there and do that. So, to thoroughly clean the exterior of your boat, make sure it's presentable is huge. If there's any issues such as, you've dinged the boat up, a dock rash or something along those lines, maybe that's the point where you need to take care of those. I don't personally even take care of my scratches until I'm done cruising because, I know I'm going to put other scratches on there potentially. So, just wait until you're done. But when you're getting ready to sell the boat, that's the time to make sure that the isinglass is good, the hull looks good, everything is clean.
Great information. And so ensuring that the boat presents itself as a boat that has been well cared for. You mentioned the isinglass. That is something that, of course, shows some wear and tear pretty quickly. Is that something you recommend people replace before the sale?
Definitely the isinglass itself. You have to kind of look at the big picture. If the bimini and the canvas is all in good shape, but the isinglass is, getting worn from the sun, most canvas shops can take the individual panels and sew a new isinglass panel into it and cut the old one out. And you basically have new glass in your existing enclosure. If the enclosure itself needs replaced, in most cases, I would say don't replace it. Expect to deal with that in the price of the boat, but don't replace it because they may want a blue canvas or a tan canvas and you've got black on there or green. Let the new buyer decide, what the canvas color would be going forward.
Okay. Moving into the interior of the boat as you're prepping for sale. What are the important things to do before the listing pictures are being taken in terms of decluttering? Do you stage a boat the way you might stage a home?
I don't really believe that staging a boat is the best way to present it. If boats are going to boat shows, staging is kind of expected because those boats tend to be newer boats, not currently in action boats. So staging it is not a big deal. But with looping boats, the majority of us are living on board. We're still on board. All our personal items are on board. So to move everything off and stage a looping boat, in my opinion, could throw up a red flag saying, hey, the boat is no longer being used. And, boats like to be used. So I'm not a big fan of staging. What I am a big fan of is decluttering. Horizontal surfaces, over the time that we're living on the boat, even if it's just a year, we collect a lot of stuff. And it's usually laying around the decks and the horizontal surfaces and things like that. So decluttering both exterior and interior, even the engine room, is huge. Let people have a good idea of the, full expanse of the spaces that they have to work with if they buy the boat, rather than having, things piled up everywhere.
Good information. So of course, all of this is getting the boat prepped primarily for listing photos and videos, also for showings. But the listing photos and videos are kind of everything because most of us are going to start our shopping process somewhere online. So, they can make or break your boat sale and how much traffic it gets. Talk a little bit about taking those photos and videos. What should you include as you're doing that walkthrough and kind of documenting visually what the boat looks like?
Yeah, pictures, videos, very important, but I wouldn't go to the extent of having a professional necessarily do them. Um, if you're planning to sell the boat yourself, then you've got to be confident in your own abilities to be able to take good high-res photos and videos and edit those and present them in a good way. Most brokers, including ourselves, take our own photos. We have our own processes and cameras that we use. I have a stabilized video camera that I use to move around the boat, which helps to take out the jerks and the jitters as you're moving around the boat. I've actually fell while videoing, and you couldn't even tell on the video that I'd fallen because it was stabilized. So those are the types of things that a seasoned broker should be able to help you with. We like to take photos all around the boat, obviously, different angles of the boat if we can. If the boat's, tucked in a dock between two boats, that's a little bit harder to get good side photos of the boat. But if the owner wants to take the boat out of the slip, that's, bonus. Walking around the boat, getting around the boat, we like to show, how do you walk down the walkways in the video? How, is it easy to get from one point to the other? And usually that's pretty common on looper boats. In the interior, we like to take wide angle photos of all the spaces, looking forward, aft, port and starboard, just so that you can see everything in the boat and what the space looks like. Some brokers will take individual pictures of each piece of electronics. I don't find that to be necessary if you have a really good photo of the helm where everybody can actually see what the electronics are there. The last thing that we use is a 360 camera, which we put into each of the spaces and take one image that basically is a big ball. It's a 360-degree view of that space, everything from the ceiling to the floor and all the way around, and you can zoom in and out and see the entire boat that way. Nothing's being hidden.
Mm-hmm. So lots of detail there. On kind of an average listing for a looper boat, how many photos and videos would you say that you're including?
We typically have a video that's around the 10 minutes in length, and that's walking around the boat, walking on the deck of the boat, walking through all the spaces and including the engine room. So, I mean, it takes roughly around 10 minutes to get a good, in my opinion, a full walkthrough of the boat. When it comes to the 360 photos, we're doing a shot in each space. So the more spaces there are, the more shots there are, but typically 8 to 10, maybe a dozen at best. When it comes to the actual photos, again, we're taking at least 4 per space where we can. So our photos usually are in the 60 to 80 pictures. And again, the more you can show of the boat itself, not individual pieces, that's better, because you're really providing a value in the photos. The one place where that may differ is the engine room, where you can't really see everything in a couple of different shots. So you do have to take some up close shots and things like that. So, but you do want to have a full catalog of photos and videos to, represent the boat well.
So as we're taking the photos, most boats have, certain little warts or issues. Let's use the example that you said of canvas. We've already talked about probably not the best idea to replace it, even if it needs it, because there could be some buyer specific tastes involved there. So assuming you're not replacing it and you know that it's not in great shape, how do you handle that in the photos? Do you show the boat in all its glory, warts and all, or do you kind of leave those out until there's a showing?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in showing the boat as it really is represented. If the canvas is bad or the isinglass is bad, let the buyer see that. That gives them an idea of how to present their offer. If a seller is selling their boat and the canvas is bad, well, we'll let them know that's, at its end of life, take your pricing into consideration, that, people are going to ask for that as a concession. So we like to show everything the way it is. If I'm told a certain piece of equipment is inoperable, I actually put it on the listing as inoperable. That way they know that coming to the boat, X piece of equipment is inoperable. And if that's a big deal to them, that's something we need to talk about prior to even seeing the boat. One of the biggest things in the industry right now that I'm hearing, when people get off other brokers' boats, is that the boats were not represented as true to life. And we try to represent our boats as true to life as possible. We're flying to our listings. Our buyers are typically flying to our listings. We're spending a lot of money and time to show these boats. We want to make sure that they're actually showing in the condition that they truly are in.
Yeah, so I'm sure for the buyers and for yourself, probably pretty frustrating to get to a boat and it is not as was presented in the listing. So great tip to be forthcoming in whatever condition or whatever issues there might be with the boat. Let's take a quick break and play a message from one of our sponsors. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about, the listing, where you should post it, and what should be included in the actual text that's within the listing. So we'll be back in a moment. Embark on the journey of a lifetime with the new Leopard 40 Power Cat, the ideal companion for exploring America's Great Loop. Enjoy unparalleled comfort and fuel efficiency as you navigate this iconic waterway. Whether you're a seasoned cruiser or a first-time adventurer, the Leopard 40 Power Cat offers the ultimate in travel ease and luxury. It's time to set sail on your dream voyage, and it all starts with the Leopard 40 Power Cat. Discover a new level of exploration and embark on an unforgettable experience. Contact us today and make your Great Loop adventure a reality. www.leopardcatamarans.com. Made in the USA for over 50 years, Aerotech Laboratories, or ATL for short, manufactures fully collapsible, on-deck, range extension auxiliary fuel bladder tanks that are available in standard configurations from 25 to 500 gallons. These lightweight fuel bladders are constructed from a rugged mil-spec nylon reinforced coated fabric and are compatible with both gasoline and diesel. ATL fuel bladders provide invaluable peace of mind when traveling long distances and are trusted by thousands of captains and crews worldwide. Go farther safely with ATL fuel bladders. Learn more and shop online at atlfuelbladders.com. We're back on the Great Loop Radio podcast. Our topic today is selling your boat, and Michael Martin with Great Loop Yacht Sales has joined us to give us some tips on that. Everyone will eventually sell their boat unless they're leaving it to be their kids' problem after they pass. So these are going to be useful tips for everybody as time goes by. We've talked a lot about how to, visually kind of make the listing itself stand out. Michael, what about the text, the description in the listing? You see, if you're on Yacht World and you're looking at boats, you see a lot of different levels of detail in that description. What's your thought on how detailed it should be?
Yeah, it definitely varies out there as to how much energy and work people are putting into their listings, brokers are putting into their listings, and sellers should really pay attention to that. Look up other brokers list, or look up the brokers that you're, interviewing to potentially list your boat, and see what kind of listing they're putting together. I've seen everything from literally a small paragraph, and that's all there is for people to kind of digest, to a list of bullet points, to what we produce is, a pretty lengthy list of every space and kind of a verbiage of everything, so that different people like different things. If you like bullets are great. If you like to read things, it's all there. So definitely, if you're selling your boat, make sure it's represented well. Make sure that your broker is taking time to, put some energy into the listing. Definitely make sure your broker comes to the boat, so that they know the boat and can answer questions about the boat. So those are just some of the simple things that, I think get overlooked, but really reviewing, those brokers' listings that you're thinking about using is probably one of the most important things you can do.
Okay. Now, the all-important listing price. Everyone's got a budget in mind. It's one of the filters you can usually search on. So super important. And we know kind of post COVID, there's some pretty high expectations on prices by sellers on what they can get for their boat or what their boat is worth. So I'm sure it's a really delicate issue when you're working on listing someone's boat. Even if you're planning on doing it yourself, trying to find that right price is pretty challenging. So, what do you do? How do you advise clients on what their boat, how to appropriately price the boat?
Obviously, the boat belongs to the seller, and they have the final say as to what the listing price will be. But we kind of guide them by using not only what's currently on the market that's comparable, but we have access to sold boats data through Yacht World that basically shows us exactly what the market bears for those types of boats, ages, makes, models, all that kind of stuff. So with using what is on the market and what has recently sold in the last couple of years, we can get a good idea of a range of, low to high. This is where your boat kind of ranges in that price list. If your boat is, exceptionally on the higher end of that list, we put the price up a little bit higher. If it's mid or average, then we go in the middle of that range. Again, the seller has, the last say in what the price is, but if we feel it's not matching up with the market, we'll let them know early on that, this doesn't match. We'll give it a shot. We'll see what kind of traffic is generated. But if we're not seeing, any kind of results, then we need to agree that we're going to change the price to be something more in line with the market.
Well, and I think you as a broker having access to those sold comps is super important and helpful because you have some realistic kind of market data on that. So perhaps most importantly is you've done all this work, you've got all these pictures, you've got your great description, you've figured out your price. Where to list that boat, where is this ad going to appear is probably one of the most important things. What do you recommend as placing the boat for sale, and where is it going to be seen?
Yeah, of course. Obviously, you want your boat to be seen by as many people as possible. Um, I kind of always ask my sellers or people that I'm talking to about, buying and selling boats, where do you look? What sites do you go to? And the typical ones, continue to come up time after time, and that's Yacht World, Boat Trader, probably the two largest ones. They've been in the industry the longest. They obviously have the most data behind them, number of listings, number of sold boat comparables, that kind of stuff. That's kind of the industry standard, and it's a great way to get your boat in front of the most buyers. There are definitely always up and coming other websites and other MLSs that are out there, and we use some of them as well. But I think the overwhelming response that I hear, and just looking at our own traffic, the majority of our traffic comes from Yacht World, Boat Trader as the number one and number two.
Mhm.
We actually have Yacht World feeding the back end of our website, and that's like the third place where most of our listings come from. So again, it's those two are kind of the industry leaders. We like to make sure that, if you're expecting your boat to be there, it's there.
Yeah. And of course, there's always social media as well. Um, not quite a listing service per se, like a Yacht World would be, but a place to get some attention for your boat. How does that typically, feed into the mix? Are there buyers going to Facebook looking for a boat to buy for the Great Loop?
Absolutely. I mean, it's obvious that social media is a huge component of marketing and selling your boat. I wouldn't say we get a ton of buyers from social media, but obviously we get a lot of presence, from social media. We get people who find us and see how we operate and, the kind of listings we're putting together. And that leads to, a relationship being generated. And so social media definitely is a part of the whole puzzle. But I wouldn't say we're getting overwhelming number of buyers from there. But again, it's part of the normal package that we have, as part of the whole picture of
Mhm.
marketing your boat.
So this has been a lot of great information. Any pitfalls that you've seen, particularly for somebody who maybe is going to try and do a for sale by owner? Anything tips you can give them on things to avoid to make that whole process more smooth?
Probably the couple of things that I would say are things that I would think of. Go back and look at your own survey when you bought the boat. If you've only owned the boat 3, 4, 5 years, that's still a fairly current survey. Have you addressed all the things that have been found on the survey or that were brought up? You obviously know your boat, but sellers can get what's called seller's blindness. And, we know that air conditioner isn't working as good as it should, but we can deal with that. We can live with it. Those are the types of things that surveyors are going to focus on, and the big ticket items are definitely the things that you want to make sure are working during your survey. Probably one of the biggest issues we have is tender registrations. If you're selling a boat with a tender, that's a completely separate vehicle and needs to be registered to one of you, whether it's buyer or a seller or co-seller. It needs to be in somebody's name that owns the big boat so that it can be sold with the boat. Probably one of the most discouraging things is we get to the end of the sale and find out that you never registered the tender, and now we have to decide whether that's going to get registered or whether it's going to be excluded from the deal. And people who are buying a boat thinking it's the whole package, that's a very discouraging point.
Right. A final question as we look to wrap up. We all know that, since COVID, everything related to boating kind of skyrocketed. And for several years there, it was very much a seller's market because everybody wanted a boat, which was leading to higher sales prices and some high expectations by sellers on what kind of a price their boat would bring. Is that starting to change? And I'm laser focused now, of course, on the looper market, because the boat market as a whole, the trends are a little bit different sometimes than what we see for looper specific type boats. So what are you seeing in the looper market in terms of supply and demand? And is it really still a seller's market?
I'd say it's definitely still slightly in favor of the seller. There is a supply and demand issue. We don't have the good inventory that we've had in past years due to a number of things. COVID, people bought up a lot of boats to social distance on and haven't resold necessarily yet. All the storms, we've kind of lost a lot of our inventory. So yeah, I would definitely say it's still in favor of the seller. It is not grossly in favor of the seller as it was coming out of COVID. And inflation obviously has been an impact on pricing as well. So all those things, bring the prices up a little bit higher. I would just say that, when you're doing your due diligence, make sure you're working with somebody who can, tell you what the market is bearing for those boats and what their value is. You don't want to rely on, buck books and NADA books that, were written by computer algorithms a long time ago and just aren't making sense anymore. So use what's out there, in the market, use true data, and see what the market is saying, boats are selling for, and just know that you are in a slightly more seller's market than buyer's market. So you may have to, up your budget a little bit to get that boat you want.
All right. Michael, thank you for sharing these details. I know you've been a looper yourself and also serving exclusively with loopers as a yacht broker for about 10 years now. And we appreciate you sharing these tips for people, regardless of how they decide to go about selling their boat, whether it's a for sale by owner or they're going to be seeking a broker. Michael Martin with Great Loop Yacht Sales, an Admiral sponsor of AGLCA. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate working with the loopers.
And thank you to everyone who's watched or listened today. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.